Thank you, Margaret, and thank you all for being here. As Margaret said, I am Margarita Barresi. I'm a debut author. This is my first novel. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I came to the States to go to college at Boston University, and somehow I never left. I don't know why, because it's winter here, and it's not winter in Puerto Rico, but here I am. I had a career in marketing communications and segued from writing for corporations to writing parenting essays and memoir essays about growing up on the island. And that led to actually writing a novel, which is, as Margaret mentioned, A Delicate Marriage. It's historical fiction set around 1930s to 50s Puerto Rico. And in its essence, it's a love story. And it's a love story of a very poor but ambitious man who marries a wealthy debutante. And they both have a passion for improving the conditions in Puerto Rico, the improving life for everybody on the island. But they differ on the best way to achieve that. So politically, they're divided, even though they're united by love. So the question is, should their marriage, like the marriage between Puerto Rico and the United States, survive? So I would like to read you just a little excerpt from the book. I'm going to start with a prologue, actually, which gives a good sense of the male main character. His name is Marco, and what his motivation is throughout the book. So prologue, the hurricane, 1928. Marco Rios spotted the red flag fluttering above the police station and sprinted home, giddy with anticipation. A hurricane, finally. Weaned on legendary tales of the big one, the San Ciriaco hurricane of 1899, he yearned to experience nature's full power, a typical 14-year-old living for forbidden adventure. But when he burst into his wooden house and registered Papa and Mama's somber faces, he tamped down his enthusiasm. They'd been busy securing their belongings and moving things off the floor in case of flooding. Susana, take the children to the church, Papa said, grabbing his straw hat. I'm going to get my mother. Mama pale. Have you gone completely loco, Diego? Tell me you're joking. She grabbed a basket of sewing notions, stuffed it onto an already crowded shelf, and shook her head at Papa. It'll take you hours. You won't make it there and back in time. Ay, mi amor, she's my mother. I have to get her, Papa said. He pointed out the window. It's not even raining yet. I'll go with you, Papa, Marco said. Absolutely not. Mama clutched Marco's arm. You're staying right here. One loco in the family is enough. Marco, I need you here to take care of your mother and sister. Papa addressed him as an equal. Can you do that? Marco's chest expanded. Si, Papa. I'll protect them with my life. He held eye contact with his father for several seconds. Papa nodded, quickly kissed each of them and headed out. Mama clenched her fist and released a grunt of frustration. She fired a few choice words under her breath before bolting back into action. She grabbed 3 blankets, a handful of guavas, and her rosary before shepherding Marco and Julia toward the town plaza, where the church bells clanged a warning. San Felipe crashed into the shores of Yabucoa before Marco's father could return. As the storm pummeled the church's cement building, those who'd taken refuge inside blocked their ears against the high-pitched howling of the brutal wind. Lips moved in silent prayer, while the humid air intensified the weighty tang of incense. Marco, Mama, and Julia huddled on a wooden pew near the white marble altar, their bones vibrating with each violent gust. Electricity crackled around them. Their arm hairs stood at attention. When the building began to shake violently, Padre Palacios ordered the windows open just an inch to relieve the pressure. The storm's cacophony was more present with the windows ajar, and the lashing rain began to leak inside. Time stood still while the wind hummed, whistled, and howled a deafening song of destruction. Marco, fully cowed, was deeply ashamed of his earlier excitement and naivete. How could Papa and Abuela survive this storm's fury without a strong shelter? San Felipe was a beast from hell. The storm raged overnight, and though Marco fought to keep his eyes open, he eventually surrendered to sleep. He woke to the smell of burnt candle wax and the sound of weeping, and pulled himself upright to see Padre Palacios holding his mother's hand, offering the usual platitude. If he's gone, my dear, it's God's will. Marco trembled uncontrollably, his mind refusing to accept the unthinkable. He sprang to his feet, darted to the back of the church, and pounded up the bell tower stairs to the town's highest vantage point. He scanned the devastated valley for a trace of his father. The countryside, just yesterday 100 shades of green, appeared denuded, as if a giant's hand had ripped out its flora. Ancient trees lay tortured on the ground. A few houses, including his own, remained standing. The vast detritus of humanity lay scattered, a black cauldron, a doll's torso, a twisted bicycle. Smashed avocados, plantains, papayas, and guavas littered the ground alongside pig, chicken, horse, and cow carcasses. The destruction was incomprehensible, yet the sky shone an incongruous bright blue, as if denying culpability. Papa, where are you? Marco's steely grip on the steeple's railing turned his knuckles white. He stayed there all day, pacing back and forth in the turret, holding vigil for his father. In the 4 long, frantic weeks that followed, neither Papa's nor Abuela's body surfaced. Marco had examined every inch of Guayanes beach, where coconut palms that once grew along the shore in majestic rows lay crisscrossed in the sand like scattered pencils. He'd scoured the flattened, flooded sugarcane fields, combed the banks of the swollen Guayanes River, and sorted through endless heaps of felled branches, boulders, pieces of homes, and panels of corrugated zinc. Within days, the heavy, repugnant stench of death had saturated the air. Mosquitoes, rats, and cockroaches abounded, while the coqui tree frog's evening melody sounded muted. After another day of fruitless searching, Marco approached the khaki tent he shared with Mama and Julia, one of a sea of canvas shelters the National Guard had set up for survivors. The ground, pure mud in the days after the hurricane, had dried into a landscape of ditches he traversed via a network of wooden planks. He wore black wool pants, some Americans' idea of what was needed on the island, and the scratchy fabric irritated his skin and made him sweat. How long would they have to live like this? Without Papa's earnings, they had no funds to build a new home nor promise of an income large enough to afford a mortgage. Would they be reduced to living in a mountain shack like destitute jibaros? His throat closed and his eyes pooled. He shook his head. No, he wouldn't succumb to his grief. He was the man of the house, the family now, and he'd be strong for Mama and Julia. He'd promised Papa he'd take care of them. It was up to him to improve their circumstances, to protect his family from ever again having to endure such a crisis. Marco made a vow. He'd dedicate his life to improving the circumstances of his people. Next time, his family would have a solid and modern home. Next time, Puerto Rico would be prepared. And we know how that ends, right? Okay, so that's a little bit about my book, which has gotten really great reviews. I've been quite fortunate in that, and both, from professionals, from other authors and readers. But the one thing I hear all the time is everybody loves the cover. And I have to admit, I judge a book by its cover. I don't know, does anybody else here judge a book by its cover? The cover is really important. So I'm going to talk today about book covers in general, and my book covers specifically, and the inspiration behind it. So I have to take you back, though, because to understand where we are today, we have to do a little bit of a, flyover on the history of book covers. From scrolls, where we were, we moved on to the codex. And codices are the first sort of modern books, if you will. They were bound. Pages were used on both sides. They were, one of a kind, hand written, hand lettered, usually illustrated by monks most of the time, because these tended to be religious texts. And they were very priced. So much so that the covers were quite fancy. So you see here, these covers of the codices were basically meant to protect the pages. But because everybody who had these was rather wealthy, they were also meant to impress. So here they are, made of beautiful precious metals, adorned with jewels and pearls, or this one is embossed leather. They were gorgeous. And they stayed this way for quite a long time until the printing press came along. And with the printing press, now books don't have to be hand lettered. So for the first time, they can kind of be, quote unquote, mass produced. But still, the covers are fairly, not as ornate, but they're pretty fancy. They were leather, they were embossed, often gilded. And again, they're there to keep the pages together and to protect the pages. With the advent of mechanical bookbinding, and now we're getting more into the mass production realm, we were finally able to actually print on cloth. So these book covers are cloth, and they have an image printed on, and a lot of the times some gold embossing was added. But for the first time, you have a hint of what's inside the book. So, this one is something about horses. That one, I think the author is Campbell. So now we're starting to see a little bit more of a connection between the cover and what's inside. And then color printing happened, and then you could really put all sorts of images on the cover in 4 colors. And then we start seeing an image and text working together to advertise what's inside the book. And actually, this became the advent for graphic design. This is where graphic design had its roots, in the design of book covers. So here are 3 examples. They absolutely have gotten to the point where the book cover is not just protecting the pages, but is also talking about what's inside. I love this one, Successful Advertising, Its Secrets Explained by Thomas Smith. Ooh, that sounds like a page turner, right? But they're really beautiful. So, they're really starting to be beautifully designed book covers. Illustrated, because I guess the medieval ones were beautifully designed too, but these are beautifully designed in a different way. After the First World War, paper became readily available, and we see the advent of the dust cover. So now the cover image is printed on a piece of paper that's then put around the book. So the book itself the book cover itself no longer has an image. It is usually just the title, like this one. But you can see how beautiful these covers are, and these are 3 famous ones. Again, the image and the type are working really well together. They give you a sense of what's inside, or at least, a vibe of what the book's about. And pretty much this is where we've been for hardcovers, And then paperbacks is basically the dust cover printed on the cover of a paperback. So this is pretty much where we are today. Covers today tend to be really eye-catching. I mean, we're in this beautiful library. You can look around and see so many beautiful book covers. They absolutely tell you something about what's inside the book. Usually they include, quotes from other authors or little bits of reviews, and often they're genre specific. And that's important for my book because my book is historical fiction, which is a genre. So let's take a look at some genre book covers. So these are some current thrillers and psychological mysteries. And you can see that the current trend for this kind of book is the title front and center, a big, big title. Everything else is secondary, including the author, which in some of these cases, is, these are some pretty well-known authors. So it doesn't matter. It's all about the book title front and center. So if you're looking for this kind of a read, this is what you're going to find on the shelves. And as a reader, you're going to get sort of indoctrinated into looking for this kind of cover, which is very different from a cozy mystery. And cozy mysteries are the Murder, She Wrote version of a book, right? So there is a mystery, but there's nothing too graphic or horrifying. Death probably doesn't involve a lot of blood. And these cozy mysteries tend to have illustrated covers. A lot of the time they involve food. A lot of the time they involve animals. So they're very friendly and approachable. Completely different kind of design, right? Science fiction is a whole nother world. So science fiction covers tend to be futuristic or have outer space elements. They are somewhat related to fantasy covers, although fantasy covers tend to have, weird, crazy creatures, lots of crowns, lots of castles. And they're very different from contemporary romance books. So contemporary romance books are the rom-com version of a book. So there's usually, it's always about a couple and, they have some sort of travails or whatever before they end up together. So you see these are all illustrated in kind of some bright, pretty colors. They show a couple interacting in some way. These are not like your big sex-filled romances, because those look like this. Now, I think you pretty much know this Our Way book, what you would be getting there. But there's, the genre of romance is so huge. I'm always amazed. There's the cowboy romances too. Then there's historical fiction romances. And then the whole Scottish, lord is its own, its own animal. And there's Amish romances. So these are completely different from the contemporary romances, but they all have a look, right? And before we get to my category, the last one I wanted to review was women's fiction. And these are the books that used to be called chick lit. And usually they're about a woman or a group of women who are going through something or traveling somewhere for some big event. And it's the story of whatever, their travails are. These are all illustrated currently for the most part. Again, in nice bright colors and very approachable, right? They seem like this is a friendly read. Then we get to historical fiction, which is my genre. What do you notice here?
Mostly women in there.
Yes, so it's a woman or several women from behind, looking at some sort of landscape, and based on what the women are wearing, or sometimes the landscape, you get a sense of maybe the period for whatever the story is. Okay, when they show the woman, from the front, usually, I'm saying 90% of the time, you don't see her face. So again, you get a photo of a woman, the title over it, and depending on what she's wearing or what her hair looks like, you get a sense of when this story might take place. So having the right genre cover is important because this book, everybody thought was women's fiction, right? But it was historical fiction. But the thing is that Lessons in Chemistry was a book that I passed over for months and months because I just wasn't in the mood for what I expected to be a light read. And I said, I'll just wait till it comes out in paperback and then I'll bring it to the beach or something. But there was so much buzz about this book and the reviews were so great. I said, well, I gotta read it. And Lessons in Chemistry was one of my favorite books of 2022. And it is absolutely historical fiction. But it was successful, I believe, in spite of its cover. And a lot has been written about its cover just not being the right design. So when it came time for my cover design, I didn't want any confusion. So let me tell you what the process was for coming up with my cover, because my process is probably different, or I know it's different, than most authors who work with large publishers. I worked with a small press, and I had 100% final say on my cover. Authors who get published by Random House, Penguin, all of the big publishers, they can have opinions on the cover, but the publisher has the final say. So if they don't like a cover, too bad, if it's what the publisher wants. So I was lucky in that way. And the way it worked is the publisher had an art director. I provided him with a lot of direction, and I'll give you an idea of what that direction was. He then worked with a graphic designer, and they came up with, I think, 8 initial concepts that I reviewed and gave feedback on. We discussed what the options could be. I got a second pass. We refined that, and I approved the final cover. So what did I want? Well, the first thing I wanted was, I wanted it to be recognizable as historical fiction. So yeah, I wanted a woman from behind. I really did. I just did. I wanted a woman from behind. And I sent the art director a bunch of examples of these kinds of covers. I also really wanted Puerto Rico to have some sort of presence on the cover because it is almost a character in the book. So, and this book can only happen in Puerto Rico, so I really wanted the cover to convey a sense of place. And what are some ways that can happen? Well, one is through the landscape, but Puerto Rico is a little interesting because it has a ton of coastline, but the whole middle part, that whole yellow, is all mountains. So the island looks like this, and it also looks like that. Another way could be through the architecture. And these are all pictures taken in Old San Juan. Has anybody been to Old San Juan? Well, this is actually what it looks like. It is so beautiful. And you have all these arched doorways and arched windows, and I thought that could be another way. A third way was through the Puerto Rican flag. I don't know if you've noticed, but Puerto Ricans, we love our flag. We love the flag. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason okay? We weren't allowed to display the flag for almost 10 years. Between 1948 and 1957, people in Puerto Rico could not own or display a Puerto Rican flag. They could not talk about independence. They could not sing the national anthem. And God forbid they have a meeting to discuss independence. And that was all because the United States was a little worried about the independence movement on the island, and they really wanted to suppress it. So you could go to jail or pay a big giant fine if you did any of these things. Not surprisingly, this was declared unconstitutional in 1957, and this happened. We put it on everything. We put it on everything. If you can wear it, you can put a flag on it. If you can drive it, if you can live in it, I mean, we love the flag. So I thought, you know, the flag could be another way to convey a sense of place. The third direction I gave was that I wanted my cover to be colorful. And that's because my book is historical fiction, but it's also Latin fiction. And Latin books are very colorful for the most part. So I wanted readers of this kind of literature to find my book cover familiar to them. And lastly, I wanted the book cover to give a nod to Puerto Rico's graphic poster art tradition. And the graphic posters in Puerto Rico, they're called carteles. And carteles came to be around the 1940s when the government wanted to undertake a public education campaign about public health and about people's rights, like the right to vote, that was targeted at the folks in the rural areas. And about 30% of that population was illiterate. So, you know, it was a challenge. How do we communicate to these people? And we have no money to do so, pretty much, next to nothing budget. So what they came up with was creating posters. And here's an example of one of the very first ones that they created. It's warning people that flies carry germs. It's telling people, bury your garbage, cover your food. So this poster, for those who could not read it, those who could read would read the poster to the people who were illiterate, and then the illiterate people would remember what it said because of the very striking image. You can see on the picture there, it's actually tacked up on the side of a wooden shack that's probably like a little market in the mountains of Puerto Rico in the 1940s. They turned out to be really effective. So they got more money to make them even better, right? So now we start seeing 3-color posters and 4-color and blocks of bright color and some images that are reminiscent to wooden block prints. Always the type is handwritten. And the Department of Education got even more money because they were doing such a good job, and they started making movies and films that were educational. So the middle one there is a poster to advertise a movie, so the people could write in where it is, what day and what time. By the 60s, they were full-on gorgeous. I mean, look at these images, they're beautiful, right? Again, blocks of color, always hand-lettered, and oh, I forgot to mention that all through from the 40s through here and through the 70s, these were actually silk screened. And you might find that a little extravagant that you had these silk screen posters that were just, you know, tacked on little wooden shacks in the mountains, but they were durable. And silk screening is highly labor intensive. And there was a lot of labor available, so it was actually really cheap to produce these silkscreen posters. So they even had that, really cool silkscreen look. So in the 1960s, they're moving more, there's less of a need to educate the population about public health at this point. So these posters became more about celebrating the culture. There was always a Christmas one every year. The middle one is celebrating an anniversary of a public housing project, reminding people to take care of their property, and so forth. In the 70s, carteles took a turn to become protest art. Thank you. So this one here is protesting the U.S. Navy's presence in the island of Culebra. The middle one is, advocating for freedom of certain political prisoners. The last one is celebrating one of the nationalist leaders of the independence movement. And then by the 70s, and since then, the posters, the carteles, have become primarily about advertising festivals or celebrating the culture. And they've become highly, highly collectible, particularly the older ones. And I have like 4 or 5 in my house. I love them. I love the way they look. They're no longer silk screened. They're, offset printed, but they do usually do a small run that's silk screened for collectors. So I wanted my cover to be recognizable as historical fiction, have something to say about Puerto Rico, be colorful, and give a nod to the cartel. So what did they come up with? Well, this is the first design I saw. And well, it's not from behind, people. So I didn't want to see her face. I felt also that the woman looked a little indigenous, and while the Taino Indians are a huge part of Puerto Rican history, they don't really have a lot of presence in a delicate marriage, so I didn't think that was appropriate. I liked the landscape behind her, but I didn't like that it was all cliffs on the ocean side. I wanted to see a little sand. And then on her other side, it looks like cacti, so it looked kind of southwestern to me over there. But I love the top. I love the top because I thought that really did a nice job of capturing little pieces of the old San Juan architecture. Then this was the next one I saw. And I pretty much hated it on site. Sorry, but first of all, it's got a couple, which, makes no sense. 0 sense of place. Maybe it looks a little bit like a cartel, I don't know, but I did not like it. And I did not like this one either because it's just the same with a different title treatment. All right, then this is the next one that I saw, and I really, really liked the landscape in this because, except for this guy, it's nice to have a beach there. I like the beach. I like the mountains in the background, the palm trees, the flowers. I thought that this was much closer a landscape to actual Puerto Rico. The woman is not facing us, so that was, progress, but she felt a little touristy to me. And let me tell you, no woman in the 1940s Puerto Rico is going to be wearing a 2-piece bathing suit. That is just not happening. So she wasn't right. And then this was a different, title treatment. Another concept, which I also really hated. The woman's all wrong because she feels really contemporary to me. I don't know if it's like that hair, but she does not feel to me like she's from the 40s. That does not look like anywhere I've ever seen in Puerto Rico behind her. And, you know, the title is just a hot mess. So I did not like that or this one, even though it's a little better without the title taking over the whole front. And then last but not least was this. And oh, look at, she's from behind. I loved her. She's got hips, she feels strong, she's wearing a really great outfit. I love the flowers in her hair. I loved this image of this woman. I did not like the old San Juan around her and how it's colored. It felt a little noir to me, and this is not a noir book at all. So, you know, I was like, but I really like her. Now, she is a stock image. Does everybody know what that means? Stock image? No? So
it's up for grabs.
Yes, exactly. So you can pay to have the rights to use it, and so can your neighbor and somebody else. So you do take a risk that your image might appear somewhere else. And believe it or not, this is really common in book covers. So, and these are well-known authors. These are big publishing houses. The same exact image. I think they changed the color of the towel. Look at this one. It happens more than you'd think. I mean, go home and Google book covers with the same image. You will not believe how many there are. So I took a calculated risk because she was just so perfect. I thought that I'm going to risk it. I'm going to go with a stock image. So what I said to the art director was, I like the top of this with this woman and that landscape. And they came back with this. So I don't know why this is so weird. It's not supposed to look like that. So, yeah, it's starting to come together, right? But I don't like how she's blocking part of the title. I think it's important to be able to read the title in its entirety. The cacti is still there, which doesn't work. I don't know what these pink blocks are, so I wanted those gone. And I also forgot to mention, I love how this type that they used looks, it's not perfect. It looks kind of like it's hand rendered, like the carteles would. So that's the feedback I gave, and this is what they came back with. So you can see the mountains now. You can read the whole title. The cactus is gone.
Finally.
Finally, it took forever, right? It's like, no. And
once you've read the book, that picture of that woman is the sophistication you expect.
yeah, yeah, agreed. Well, thank you for saying that. So yeah, this is the final color, and that's how it came together. So, any questions? So.
Did you ever consider using like photos that you had taken?
I did consider that. If you go to my website, the homepage of my website is a photo of my grandmother who who's wearing a beautiful tulle ball gown that is covered in orchids. So not too extravagant, right? So I thought that that would be a really cool picture to have on the cover, but then, I don't know, I prefer it on the website, I think. I didn't want to give the character a face that would be, to put, her face into the reader's mind. I wanted the reader to imagine what she looked like on their own.
So true, because sometimes when you read the book and then you see the movie, you go, why did they pick
Yeah,
that person?
that's not the right person, right?
Why envision for that character?
Yeah. So that's why I did that. Any other questions? Yes?
Did you find, I imagine so, based on the number of cacti seen, but did you find And also that weird mountain that looked more like Vermont than Puerto Rico. I just couldn't get over that with the pink trees. Did you find you had to do a decent amount of like education on Puerto Rican landscape and the vibe you kind of wanted to
Yes.
the art directors?
I sent so many images to the art director that he said to me, no one's ever given this much great direction. I'm sure it was great. But, and I should mention that Puerto Rico does have a dry forest with cactus or cacti in the southwestern part of the island, no, southeastern. So we do have cacti, but not that many.
May I ask about the art director? I'm fascinated that with all the direction you gave, which is unusual, that you still weren't getting much faster response in terms of like you were giving the direction and you were saying not this, yes this, and that they couldn't composite it.
Well, the first 8 all came at once.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
And were you dealing with like, did the publisher assign one art person, and that was you didn't have a choice, and that was the person you had to work with?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's actually in Brazil. I love how, you know, our world you can work with anybody anywhere in the world. Who knows where the designer was? But yeah, he was in Brazil. And I'm thrilled that he was assigned to me because I thought he was fantastic.
But it's a beautiful cover.
Thank you. The flag didn't make it, but I thought that was okay.
I think you had all the other points.
I think so. You know, we don't have to hit people over the head. All right, well, thank you so much. Yes, it's called Atmosphere Press, and it's what's considered a hybrid publisher. So they have all of the services of a major publisher, like, you know, art direction and editing and copy editing and laying out the book and all of that stuff. But you pay upfront for that service as opposed to the publisher paying you, and then you have to earn the money back. So I paid upfront, and then all of the sales from the book are mine. So it's kind of like a hybrid, I guess, hybrid and backwards. But some authors who self-publish, they do it all. They find an editor and they find somebody to lay it out. I didn't have to do any of that. It was all, you know, there for me.
First of all, what made you want to start to write? You know, that wasn't your first career.
Right.
What got you started, and then how long it took you, and like, you know, the challenges that you faced.
As an avid reader, I've always kind of wanted to write a novel. And in my career in marketing communications, I wrote every day. I wrote annual reports and website copy and brochures and articles. But, you know, perhaps not about things that were completely interesting or scintillating to me. So I always knew that I could write well, but I was under no illusions that I could write a novel because writing a brochure is very different. So once my daughters were off to college, I started taking craft classes. So novel writing, plotting, character development, all of those things. And little by little, you know, I learned how to write a novel. The story that I wanted to tell was loosely based on the story of my grandparents. So the first third of the book, which is their courtship, is 100% based on my grandparents, and all of the things that her father does to keep them apart are true and really did happen. So I grew up hearing these stories and they were so fun, and I thought, geez, I really want to tell their story. At the same time, I wanted to educate about Puerto Rico because since I've been here, since I came in 1979, I'm constantly surprised at how little Americans know about the island and how little Puerto Ricans who grew up here even know about the history of the island because it's not taught. It's just, it is a colony though. They just call it a territory, but it's
Is that politically correct?
yes, it's definitely a colony.
But there is a military presence there.
Oh yeah.
Regularly, I mean, it's,
Yeah, well, during World War II, the United States built, I think, 6 different military bases on the island because the island had such a strategic location in the Caribbean. And there were Nazi submarines off our shores and everything. So yeah, I mean, there are a million reasons why the United States, wants to continue to have Puerto Rico. But, I was asked things like, when did you get your green card? And my absolute favorite was, well, is your house near a village? And I grew up on a high rise on the ocean. Yes, we're in a city. So I really wanted to tell a little bit about the story of the island and the story about the people in the 40s and 50s who really thought that they were doing the best that they could for Puerto Rico, and the decisions that they made are still having repercussions today. So there was a lot to tell.
So are you moving on to your next novel?
I am.
Can you tell us a little about that?
I will. When I was researching the time frame for A Delicate Marriage, I learned that the birth control pill was tested on women in Puerto Rico in the late 1950s without them being told that they were participating in a drug trial. But based on that study, the laws for how you have to conduct drug studies have changed because of that. So I want to tell a story, these women's story, as my next book.
Can't wait.
Thank you.
do you have a title?
No, I don't have a title. And I didn't have a title for the longest time for this one either. It just eventually came to me. I wanted to actually call it Commonwealth because that's what we technically are, a Commonwealth of the United States. But then Ann Patchett, I think it was Ann Patchett, came out with a book called Commonwealth while I was still writing. So I said, well, I'm not going to compete with Ann Patchett. So, but I kind of like this title better. So.
I think it fits.
Yeah, thank you. I do too.
Well, we hope you'll come back and present your next book.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.